Hi, to the listeners out there. This is Linda Coyle, and we have, who else is out there? Susan Bedingfield
Hi.
and Trish, who?
Trisha Cook.
Okay, complete transparency. I got to turn this music off because of my learning difference. I'm very, very.
I was wondering what was happening.
Yeah.
There we go. That's
Start
what I was
singing to
talking
the
about.
music. That's
Okay.
funny.
It was messing her up.
Yes. So, oh my gosh, and I have a new phone. Lord, take over. You hear that? I'll just turn it down. That's what I'll do. Okay. So anyway, we have Susan Bedingfield here, who has her own memoir called Where's Katie? From Fear to Freedom. It's about her journey as a mother of a child who has the gift of dyslexia. And do you want to tell us just a little bit about that before we get started?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you for introducing me. And I wrote a memoir basically to share my journey as a mom, from being afraid of what was going on with my daughter because I didn't really know what was happening, and making that, really navigating that journey from feeling free, that from fear for her and what was happening to her, knowing that, embracing who she is as a person instead of feeling like I needed to change her somehow, and fix her or something, and just loving and embracing her for who she is and helping her figure out how to reach her potential every day and really go for her goals and realize that who she is, and how she's designed is exactly how she should be.
So we're all perfectly imperfect, right? And so thank you for taking the time to write down all of your thoughts about what it was like to be a mother of a child who had this unique way of learning, and not giving up, and not your focus was to figure her out, like, what is she all about, and her learning uniqueness wasn't going to be what defined her. So that makes me think about how years ago when I was in school, people didn't know what dyslexia was, nor did they know where to go or how to get help with that. So I think about my parents and how they had 7 children, and I was the one, like Katie, and they didn't know what to do. And so I think the way things have changed, from when I was in school, was that, the psychologist that they sent me to, it was, I just remember, coming home and then my dad opening the door and there was no discussion. So, well, what did the I know that it's a person who looks at me for the way I am as a student in school, like what was the outcome, right? So today I believe that a psychologist would let the parents know, and then hopefully the parents, like yourself, would sit down and say, listen, there's nothing wrong with you, you just learn in a different way, and so moving forward, this is what we're going to do. And so I would hope that that's the way things would be done, because my parents were of the mindset that, oh, we're not going to fill her little brain with such thoughts, that basically that we don't want her to feel ashamed of, the fact that she learns differently. When today, we now know that having dyslexia and all of our neuro differences are actually gifts. And that is our mission, right? That's our mission. Us three women together, we want to get the word out that learning differently is good, and there's nothing wrong with it. So that brings me to Trish Cook. She is an author of Nurture Their Nature, which stems from her Albert program, which is what I've been blessed with implementing in my classroom. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Trish?
Well, I'd seen too many parents go to whoever who was requested to them to go see to help get the help for the child. So they were going everywhere, not going to the correct people, possibly spending money, wasting time, when we really needed a program that looks at the whole child and the whole neuro difference, because it's, again, like I said last week, one brain. So there are going to be several deficits going on. So my program, again, I believe covers every area of the whole child, and including the spiritual development that's going on, and to help them, that's the way that they're going to heal. Because my story is, I was diagnosed in 1983, found out this weekend from last weekend from my mom. It was actually, I was labeled severely learning disabled. Okay, that's the attribute coming up that I wanted to speak of, the stumbling over words, because the trauma involved with that label had given me that I just started stumbling over trying to say it. But anyway, so with that being said, when I got in my my early 40s, late 30s, I was like retraining my brain, but then still was very insecure and unsure, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was all the anger and shame I had experienced. So that's the spiritual development I'm talking about, to look at that aspect of the emotion that comes behind having a learning difference. So that's what my Albert's all about, getting people to specific people who they need to see.
Wow. It's what's really coming up for me through just having a conversation with Susan about her daughter, and how important it is to be able to let our kids know that there is nothing wrong, first and foremost, right? To really spend that time getting to know the child's gifts and strengths, their learning uniquenesses, all of that, right? And getting the parents involved with helping them heal and make them understand that your child is beautiful, and there's nothing wrong, and we just need to be teaching them in a different way, right? So it makes me realize what a gift it is to just sit here and have this conversation, because this week in my classroom, as much as I feel like I'm taking that time to do social emotional first, I had an experience where we were reading the novel Wander, and I have this twice exceptional, beautiful student, and all of a sudden he's inside the front cover of the book, like he's gifted with his artistic ability, and he started drawing on this blank page. Well, he saw it as a canvas that was like screaming like, hey, draw on me, because it's blank. And so I had to take a moment and stop, because you know what, that's not an area for you to, it's okay, because you didn't know, but now you know. And we went through the whole thing at $20 a piece times 10 is $200, plus all the other books that we have to get our hands on during the school year, and they have to last for a long time. So it's okay. I kept saying, it's okay. Just so you know, in the future, we're not going to do that. Everyone now knows, right? Well, I thought that I was done. So now I'm working with him one-on-one, and I'm noticing like he's just not himself, and he doesn't seem focused, and he's not excited about what we normally do together. And then all of a sudden he said, please don't, please accept, please, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about what I did. I'm sorry. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's still ruminating about that, which I thought I addressed and it's done, right? So we need to provide opportunities for kids to really throughout the day check in and say, how are you feeling? Because if you are emotionally stuck and there's some trauma that you're feeling, uh, there's no learning going on. He couldn't learn.
Yeah, you
anything.
had asked him something that he had learned last week, and you pretty much knew he had mastered last week. You had it,
He had it
and it
and
was gone.
it was gone. So what an eye opener and what a gift it was to me to like really take a step back and realize, you know what? I act like I don't have an agenda, but it was like I had a list of things to do that day. And come on now, we need to move on because I got to get with the next group. But I was so grateful for that opportunity because it was just a real eye opener, especially when I
Now,
took the time to tell him you're okay and it's all right.
now we had already pre-assessed him and saw on the anger shame checklist that I have that he already had shame, didn't he? From the questions you had answered about him earlier.
Uh-huh.
So when he's feeling shame like that, you stopped, you recognized it, and that's the most important, and you didn't go on with the agenda.
Mhm.
2, I would have him recognize his shame too, saying, I know you might be feeling shame right now, but what happened? But the thing is, when somebody feels shame, empathy is really the answer for this. Can I tell you a bit about my story and empathy or something like that? So you
Mhm.
really take that as a learning opportunity because you know he was already predisposed to shame according to the checklist we had done. So that was perfect.
Yeah, and just to drop everything because we talk is so funny because I have one student, my deaf student, he always says to the interpreter, why does she keep calling us a family? My family's at home. And I'm like, but we're a school family because I spend more time with you guys than I do at home with my own family, right? During the school year, we're together as a school family. And what um, goes on in here matters, right? And if you're not feeling secure or supported or loved, and your needs aren't being met, we have to drop everything and help each other. Um, and I have to say, I've always had that philosophy, but this year more than ever, the fact that we started the year off with team building, the fact that we started the year off with really sitting and interviewing and doing those checklists just makes them realize that, you know what, my teacher really does care about me and I feel safe here, right?
So
Uh,
Susan might not realize what we're saying, that she didn't start off the school year right with the academics right away. She didn't go gung ho without the fact that she needed to look at the SEL components first. Big difference from when Katie was in school, I bet. Huh?
Yes, it's interesting because we actually homeschooled. And
Oh, that's right.
as a mother, the girls, I wanted our home to be a haven for our family, for all of us to feel safe. So from the time they, you know, were born, we never allowed them to make fun of each other or call each other names or not include one another. And so that was the foundation that we laid for Katie that was really God given, because when she would not be able to find the word, or when she would swap words for songs, or she would call a product something different, whether it was school related or just life related, it was important that her sisters didn't make fun of her, and we were able to see was it making her feel. There were times when Katie could laugh at herself and a word swap that she had, and then we knew it was okay for us to laugh along with her or help her correct it, or just not really draw attention to it. It just sort of depended on how it made her feel, and we would go from that. And so, but as a homeschool mom, it was interesting because the dynamic of our school group, or of our school time, had to be safe also. So it was like, this is Katie's home as well as her school, and so it was very, very important for her to feel safe emotionally safe. And that's why this journey was really even harder for me personally, because as her teacher, I would take a lot of her learning personal. If there was something that she wasn't mastering, I would see it as an inadequacy of my own. And especially when we didn't have a diagnosis, I guess you'd say, we didn't have we hadn't had her tested yet. And so I would see that my other girls were thriving, and I'm doing the same things with Katie, and yet she's not necessarily quote thriving. And I thought, oh my goodness, I am so inadequate to teach her, and I am so inadequate, I'm not a good mother for Katie. So all the emotions of teaching and family and motherhood would get so entangled, and that was a lot to navigate.
A
Wow.
lot of homeschool moms felt inadequate until they got their diagnosis for their child, and then they could see it wasn't them. Think about
Right.
my story a little bit growing up. Went to a lot of private schools because I grew up in New Orleans. But these were some of the best schools in New Orleans, that these teachers, they prided themselves, is that a word? They took pride in themselves for working at this school, and they got these degrees. And then there's this child that's not learning from me. And what is wrong with that child? It was not about looking at, maybe there was a neuro difference at first, until I got the diagnosis. But finding out from my mom last weekend when we started to talk about this podcast I'm doing and other things I'm doing, she said, that they were very frustrated with me again in first grade, and they wanted to hold me back again. And so that part of it, again, like, you held me back once and you wanted to hold me back again. Why couldn't you just make it about finding out what was happening? They just was
Right.
so.
Right. Yeah. It's hard for us as parents, and to realize I'm really here as an advocate for Katie. I fight for her. I fight with her, and we fight to figure this out. To how does she learn? It's like Linda said, she's just not being taught how she learns. And so for me to be willing to learn a different way to teach was what I had to do.
So for the listener, my name's Linda Coyle. We have got Trish Cook here and Susan Bedingfield, and we have come together to discuss what it's like for Susan to be a mother of a dyslexic, and Trish and I both have dyslexia with a plethora of other learning uniquenesses. I wanted to mention how last week last time we were together, we had some audio issues, and there was just too many nuggets that were mentioned that, I'd like to take a moment and go back to. But before I do that, I want to say, Susan, thank you for being brave and stepping out and mentioning that you were feeling inferior, because as we move forward with implementing my Albert in the classroom and wanting to get it out to make changes in the future of schools and how we can address the whole child. I just wanted to say thank you, because what we're realizing is that the teacher and the parents have to heal first before we even move forward, simultaneously with us learning what the child is all about through our initial assessments. We also need to spend the time to help teachers understand that it's not about them. And it's okay. It's okay that you don't know what to do with this child, because it's unique, right? So it's important for us to support them and let them understand that this is the way that these types of learners learn best. But I also wanted to mention last week how what a blessing it was for you and your daughter to come up with a word. I wish that to me would have changed everything for me if my parents just came up with that word peanut butter or whatever word. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. it, it really was very helpful in the dynamic of our relationship, um, to know that when she was feeling less or demeaned or ashamed, or if I had come across in a way for whatever reason that made her feel inadequate somehow, and I wish that never happened, but sometimes it did, because I just didn't communicate well for some reason at that moment.
Because you're human, could that be it?
Because I'm human, yes, and because I didn't completely understand, or because I was trying my very, very best not to, and still did, and all that is human. That's true. And so I would apologize later, but then when I would realize that Katie, just like the boy in the classroom you were describing, you were seeing in him that he wasn't himself. And so when I would see that in her, and I would look back and I would think, oh man, but she didn't really have the words that Trisha does to explain what's all going on in her head. And I didn't always know either. I just knew that she wasn't doing well emotionally. And so I would say, instead of having to have all the words to express all those hard things, we just came up with a word that was our code word, that I knew if she just looked at me while something was happening and she just said peanut butter, I would know what that meant, and I would know, oh wow, okay, she's happy, she's struggling emotionally, and it's interrupting her learning and her time together, and I need to relax, or I need to step back, or I need to calm down, or whatever it is. I need to be more sensitive. And so I would just know it meant all those things, it meant all of those words that she couldn't find at that moment. We might be able to talk about it later when it wasn't in the moment and wasn't happening right then. But in that moment, she needed to just feel safe.
And I'm sure there's plenty of times, sorry, Linda, that y'all just laugh together and have a lot of fun, because think about it. One of the attributes of somebody with dyslexia is comedy, because we can mimic
Right.
people so well. It's so funny what we can do, but
Yeah.
also to compensate for our academics is to make everybody laugh. And we actually got a really dry sense of humor because we're really intelligent. Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. So I'm sure there's times y'all just laughed together and had fun and lightened the room up.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
it just occurred to me how we're academia type. We've studied, all three of us have studied education. Linda with her master's in dyslexia, so on, and myself, and you, Susan, with your capability of getting your master's recently. That we're so academic, but there is a lighter side to all of this that we gotta touch on. Linda, what have you done this week just to have your kids just to take a brain break and just stop and breathe and have fun?
But wait, so thank you for saying that I have my master's degree. Unfortunately, the 2-year
Oh, it's
program,
a 2-year program. Okay, I keep on wanting to say.
they told me, listen, you have a choice. You can choose not to go through this program that changed your child's life. You will not, it should be a master's plus 15, especially with, me with my learning difference going into like a rigorous program. It should be a master's plus 15, but you will not end up with any of it. You'll just have a certificate. And I thought, you know what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether
Absolutely.
I have to give back. I have to do what you did for my child. And then in the end, it was, oh, I just can't even. It gave me exactly what my brain needed. And then all of a sudden, all these doors started to open up where I could teach children the way I needed to be taught, right? So to be able to give back.
Can I
like
mention an attribute of dyslexia?
Yeah.
So with dyslexia, we have a pretty strong will in our mind, and we like to see them the way that we see them. So in my mind, I saw this I remembered it was 2 years, and I wanted to say, hey, that was a master's degree, because in my mind, it doesn't want to let go of the fact that it's equivalent to. So
Right.
that is an attribute of dyslexia, because I know you don't have a master's degree, but in my mind it's different. My mind sees what it wants to see. So that's a very interesting attribute of dyslexia that I have to bring up, is the outside of the box thinking, the problem solving. But then and again, we have this strong will in our mind, and it's hard to change our minds, especially
Yes.
if it's something that's inside of our purpose of doing. So I just wanted FYI on all that.
So that brings me to last time we were together, we were talking about the attributes and the characteristics of dyslexia. And Susan's daughter and I are very similar in that we can read, right? And we might have some difficulty with spelling and everything. However, it was the word retrieval component of dyslexia. Can you speak a little bit to what happens to someone like ourselves, why we get stuck like that?
Okay. So we have what's considered characteristics of dyslexia. And let's say the auditory part I've mentioned before, when we hear a word or read a word, we're going to delete the middle sound, and we have to make up for that by substituting, repeating, addition to it, and sometimes deleting altogether. And it doesn't mean it can't happen at the end of the word nor the beginning. That's one form of what we call looking at dyslexia to see. That's a characteristic. Another characteristic of not dyslexia but ADHD is we're going to run through a sentence. We're going to do complete run-on sentences. We're going to skip all small words. That's that hyperactive mind. Another characteristic would be central auditory processing disorder that you might do that where, for instance, Linda, earlier we had planned an intro music and then we were all excited about this wonderful intro music that we were going to play. But then you went to go speak, and that was playing in your ear, and it wasn't. It was, what it was doing was haywiring your brain, so you couldn't access your language. But if you had been playing classical music, that's the smooth type of chant rhyme meter pattern that works with your brain. You would have been able to recall. It was a real upbeat type of song. So that is a characteristic.
Wait, so stop there for 1 second. Was that not God letting me let the listener know first and first, up close and personal, this is what we're talking about? I had a beautiful introduction plan. I couldn't think of Trisha's last name. What?
That
Like,
would
Yeah.
be me just being nervous, just get old-fashioned nerves.
Okay, so it could be the music she was playing, like I said, with the brain haywiring, with it not being the correct rhyme meter pattern, whatever works with her brain. Speaking of figuring that out for students, is also she was nervous. Okay, so what happens is beginning of reading a paragraph, you'll see them get more anxious at that point. Now, this is
Yeah.
another characteristic.
Yeah.
And they'll start to stumble over the words at the beginning. Okay, that's that anxiousness and anxiety coming out. So that's a characteristic. Now, another characteristic is that's having to do with visual processing, is that they were to reverse words or reverse letters, reverse words, or transpose them. That means put one ahead of the other in any part of the sentence. Now that's another characteristic. Now attributes.
thoughts you had
What?
mentioned this week, what's the word, disparaging?
Yeah.
Also, that in the back of our mind, that I'm being judged about the way I speak, and I'm being judged on specifically what I'm saying. So that going on, that ruminating, like, oh,
Emotional trigger, was it anger or shame? That's where you have to ask yourself. Well, the shutdown is shame. Anger is hyperactivity. So you could have had anger and shame going on at that time. And at the beginning of this. So so it's all of it is tied to the emotional triggers. All of it is tied to the emotions behind it, all the characteristics, all the attributes. Now let me go into the attributes. The attributes are the fact that we're whole picture thinkers. That's an attribute. So we get everything large picture. We just have the problem of being able to break it down for everybody else, because it's required to be able to break things down. So that's where you give them the tools of analysis. And but anyway, so just that whole picture thinking, that's an attribute. Another attribute, because that goes across all learning differences and minds. Another one is being able to be sensitive to other people's feelings, other people, the way that they're looking at us, the way that they're speaking to us. Now that is a attribute because it's relating to emotion and affect. So another one is just care and concern for people, animals, and nature. That's another attribute that I appreciate a whole lot. Another attribute is being able, again, I think I keep on bringing up this problem solving because I love that if you could give a student in your classroom a problem and give them the freedom to research that problem and come up with their own solutions, then taking that gift, whatever it may be, whether it be drama, music, whatever, taking that gift and meshing it with what their attribute is of being able to problem solve, they can learn anything. They'll be able they'll have to read, they'll have to write, they'll have to get their point across. So they'll make do with intervention. But then they have investment in it and they see the why behind what they're learning. Speaking of the why behind dyslexia, the why, we don't think this is an attribute. We don't think what first, we think why first. And then we're going to come to what it is that people want us to know. But the why is what drives us in our thinking.
Which brings us to wanting to have our classrooms driven by experience-based learning. We want our kids to be learning based on what they want to learn because they are emotionally invested in that. We have been doing that in our classroom. I jot down like, oh, wait, what was your question? Oh, that's an excellent question. Should we read about that next week? And then I go find books or articles on that particular topic and they feel supported. They feel like, wow, you're really taking an interest in my learning. But really it's a wonderful way to keep their attention and they want to know about it. So they're going to do, like you said last week when we spoke, you really described the perfect classroom in that you want the child to be able to do experience-based learning, but you elaborated a little more on what the classroom should look like. Can you speak to that?
With you not starting academics right away, but get this good whole picture capture of who your students are to meet all their needs, social, emotional, exceptional, all of them, academic, that we also had you fill out and ask them what interests they had, dinosaurs, Legos, drawing, so on and so forth. So I think what I was saying is I took Einstein as the example because I think he's perfect. He had an affinity for physics and finding out everything related to whatever his theory of relativity was. So he just wanted to find out everything about that. And then, so to say that somebody asked him about a basic science term he didn't know the answer for because he didn't want to fill his brain with all of that. Steve Jobs, same thing with him. He wore the same thing and ate the same thing because he didn't want to fill his mind with other things. It's because they have a good understanding of brain connections. And so what's happening is you're filling too much content or context switching constantly. It really sends that mind into chaos. But if you go with their interest, don't switch context and content constantly, and then be able to, what you said earlier is saying, I like that question that you had. Let's go research more into this. That's going with their why that I was talking about earlier, most likely. And if you go by those three things, you will be having them to have autonomy in their learning. If you don't have autonomy in the learning, you have anger. And anger does not it's not good for learning, because you're gonna be fight and flee. You're gonna be on the protective state of learning. We want them on the proactive state, not the protective state. And once the thing is that sometimes the anger is not working for them, they go into shame, and shame is in a shutdown. So you don't want to trigger any of these emotions of anger and shame. And a teacher that doesn't have autonomy for the student, that means exactly the three things that I mentioned earlier. You're going to have children in anger and shame, and there's going to be shut down constantly, and they're not going to be proactive in their learning. Does that answer
So,
your question?
that was beautiful. So what I'm realizing as you're speaking and I'm reflecting on what you're saying, I still have, within the public school environment, you have a schedule and I still look at it, right?
Mhm.
Right now we should be in math. Can you speak to routine and consistency for a learning neurodifferent person? As much as we want them to have autonomy and we just kind of go with it,
Right.
still
Okay.
need to expose them to
You
routine.
still have your scope and sequence. Every curriculum should have a scope and sequence in the front cover. You still have that, but you're not setting a time for, oh, this is math, this is the opportunities will come up. But you're what's driving the curriculum is the scope and sequence, and that you're following it, and that they're mastering, and you're not moving on until they've mastered each of those levels at their own pace. So, so therefore, if it's math time and you just left English, guess where their mind still might be? Something with English, because they're not ready to move on, because that's the context and content switching.
Yes. And I just remember my one student from last year, he graduated and he had such a hard time coming off certain things. And that's exactly why. It wasn't him being oppositional, defiant. It was like, my brain is so into this right now.
Mhm.
So I'm not
It's not
quite,
complete. It has to complete a whole cycle of whatever it is working out on itself, and then it's ready to move on.
yeah. Lots of changes I see for the future of education, and not quite sure where, to begin, other than, you know, with the case study that I'm doing, maybe me showing this is where we were, this is where we are in the end, and big picture, the kids come out emotionally on top. They're feeling like they have a purpose. They feel like they have tools to, begin and
You
finish.
told me when we first started talking, you wanted the main goal is for them to succeed in life. That means that they would leave you and you felt like they knew what their purpose was and they could be headed that way. That's what you saw, and that's what you wanted. Even though you teach self-contained middle school, you were thinking ahead. Speaking of attributes of dyslexia, Linda's dyslexic, Susan's daughter is, I am. One of them is feelings and future. Most people want us to know facts, forms, and functions of things. That's more of the what, right? We care more about feelings in the future. And that's what Linda was thinking for her children, was ahead, way ahead. So, and that care for
What were
their
you
future.
saying to another attribute? Is it an attribute where we take things further, deeper?
Further, faster. So yeah. So I had somebody get a hold of me and said, I have a student that just wants to learn history and that's it. Okay. Because that's what his affinity was for, is for history. So in that, I have to believe and trust in him that he's got a strong purpose in life with something. Maybe that's my dyslexia. Maybe my attribute of my neurodifference is being able to look at feelings and future. But I'm thinking that's part of his purpose in life, is something related to history. And that's, he could do something really big in that area and do it further, faster, better than anybody. That's the same thing with Einstein and his physics, is he took it further at his affinity, further, faster, better. So if that person who would contact me would trust the child, trust his purpose and his understanding of learning related to that, then he could sometimes add in math when it allotted. When it could sometimes add in, not that the student should get intervention, I'm going to say that, but sometimes they should add in formal types of academic education, but put the emphasis on his, again, problem solution, being able to take that gift and be able to present those answers for whatever it is with history. I don't know what they are. He could look at something that's going on now, maybe some problem now that he could in the future be able to fix or make better for everybody. Because again, we care about immensely people, animals, and nature. Problem is sometimes people, animal, and nature has us against them when our natural internal instinct is to care so much for those areas. So just trust him and trust his purpose,
Wow. Thank you for that. So for the listener, we're just 3 women that God put together last year around this time. I was in a special ed group. I was praying to God about, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I hear you. I know, you want me to take my tutoring of dyslexics and my teaching of dyslexics in my classroom to another level. And I don't know how on earth am I going to do this, because I'm learning all these other platforms where I'm teaching my students from a computer rather than being in front of them. And in comes Trish, and I get introduced to my Albert, that is a curriculum that's all designed for the whole child. And I can't express enough about what a blessing it has been to meet Trish, not only for that platform alone, but just the opportunity to speak and share what's going on in my classroom. So she's basically my coach. And then we've got Susan, who's a mother and a homeschool teacher. And her ability to see her child for the gifts that she has as a learning, a neurodifferent person is a blessing, and a reminder that it starts there. It starts with the parent. It starts with the teachers. And if we understand and we look at the child as, the gift of dyslexia rather than
Yes.
they're different.
Linda, let me just say that Katie is now an adult. She's 28 years old. And so through the years of homeschooling, it brought me to become, educated in multi-sensory instruction. I went through that training so that I could help Katie. And so now I've currently been a tutor for 15 years of other students with dyslexia. So I do have a private tutoring business called the High Five House. And it's been an amazing journey just weekly to meet with students. And like you, we've made that transition from in person to online, and I've stayed online, but it's been awesome, an awesome journey to take my journey as a mom and working with Katie, and still now navigating adult life with Katie as a dyslexic person is my next adventure.
Yeah, and I really would love to. It would be wonderful. We're not quite sure where we're going with this podcast, but it does seem like there are dyslexics that want to tell their story. So hopefully we'll meet Katie and she'll be able to share her journey and where she is now. And I would hope that, me as a mature woman, I could let her know how blessed she was to have a supportive. I'm not poo-pooing my parents. It's just that they didn't know what to do, but that she had a very supportive family and they understood her.
Thank you.
And that, you know,
Yeah.
she's going to be a blessing to others. She's
Oh,
got
thank you.
an empathetic heart, and I don't know, we're just,
Yeah, Katie would love that. She loves to talk about being dyslexic. She is now crossed over to just loving being dyslexic.
Oh,
She's like so proud of being dyslexic. And so she definitely will talk about it. And
that is such a blessing to hear. I wondered that. I meant to ask you that. Where is she now with it, right? And
yeah,
I wish I even had that knowledge, just being, you know, an educator. And like last week we were talking, Trish, and I'm sure we have to get summarizing and get going here, but how you were talking about, you know, we were talking about the hierarchy. Like whenever I'm in a situation where I feel like, the example was the principal and the vice principal, when I was trying to get a point across, like immediately, because I'm speaking to them, I get that feeling like I can't think of my words, right? I go right back to my old way before I understood what dyslexia was. And you helped me with that. You said that's the shameful feeling coming back, like I'm going to be found out, I'm not good enough. And so I found that to be very interesting. And like, if you're tired,
yeah. So with our dyslexia, having the experiences we have, we're filling up our shame cup, letting our family down in school, letting our principal down because she's telling you that every memo that comes out has to be read by her first, so on and so forth, talking too fast for you to maybe understand, and her knowing that you're having a hard time with it. All of that is causing shame. So that shame's filling up. So you tend to get the imposter syndrome and a self-defeating attitude towards oneself. And that's where acceptance of the learning difference comes in. Once you can accept it, then and only then those attributes overtake all those characteristics that we're talking about, those wonderful attributes. And that you have to honor those characteristics that aren't so fun: word recall problems, working memory problems, the deleting of the middle position, the stumbling over words at the beginning. All of those things go second to then being able to accept that you have a learning difference, but you also have these wonderful attributes and gifts to give the world. And it is different, and that's okay. Different is good.
that's right. Different is good.
and that is a perfect segue to saying thank you for this wonderful time together. Next week, I think our hope would be to move forward with listening a little bit, or a lot of bit, about Trisha's journey. I got to share some of my journey. I think that we're healing along the way. Like certain things just kind of come up, and we get to just discuss like girlfriends here on this platform. But hopefully, we'll hear a little bit about what life was like as a student of a person who, like myself, has
Didn't
dyslexia.
feel like it was a gift. Yeah, that's
Yes,
fun. I'll get to look at that and think
yeah.
about it all week.
And that how God delivered you from it, and that's the part that we're so grateful for. That you know what, there was no it was not a coincidence that day that I was driving home, commuting with my husband, and I had this unbelievable urge, like right then and there. My parents had just passed away, and I was just feeling disenchanted and second guessing my ability as an educator, as a mom, as a wife, as a sister, as a friend, everything. And I said, I know that we normally go home and chop those vegetables right now, but I need to go to the gym right now. Like, just drop me off. I know, but please. And so he dropped me, and there was that psychologist that had tested me, and it was like that was God working in my life. But before I even knew, I'm like, I needed to know what I know, that I was diagnosed with dyslexia, but I needed to hear from you. You tested me, and he said, yes, you would have had dyslexia. That's back then it would have been called dyslexia. And so that was like, oh, it's exactly what I needed to hear. And then he shared with me the bell curve, and then I was intelligent. I was like, what? Are you just saying that to make me feel better? Because I needed to hear that desperately. And then my husband walked in. I said, get over here. He said, I'm smart. And he said, I've been saying that for years. I'm like, but I couldn't see it. Right. So that was just such a blessing that I got to experience that. And so every day there's a new opportunity to just see how God's working in our lives and how he has a plan, and we are listening and really look forward to and have a lot of hope for students, future students, teachers, parents, all of it.
Well, okay, guys, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.